This is Real Estate Rookie episode 330.
And I figured out right away that he just needed help keeping everything organized in his mind because he's got so many projects going on. It's like when you're project managing and you don't have systems going up. And so I just started like recording as much as I could in information, recording like where they're at in the construction process, what they need to do, keep all the tasks organized. So that way he's on the road calling me, hey, run through the priorities right now. So that was in the beginning, like where the value was, and then just continuing to organize from that so that we could be more effective and efficient.
My name is Ashley Kerr, and I'm here with my co-host, Tony J. Robinson.
And welcome to the Real Estate Rookie Podcast, where every week, twice a week, we bring you the inspiration, motivation, and stories that you really need to hear to kickstart your investing journey. And if I look a little bit different, I'm actually sitting in a hotel room. I've been here since Sunday, and I didn't even tell you this yet, Ash, but there's this idea called a Think Week that Bill Gates used to do, where he basically like go into a cabin in the woods somewhere and like lock himself away for a week and just read a bunch of stuff about whatever's like pressing in his business. So I've been trying that out. I've been here since Sunday. I leave on Friday. So really just deep diving a lot of different parts of our business. And it's been incredibly helpful to have like a week with nothing.
So are you kind of like shutting out everything else, like your normal daily activities, like you are actually on vacation? Yeah.
So I mean, outside of the podcast, I really haven't had any meetings or calls this week at all. And I even like deleted social media from my phone just so I could like really be focused in. And it's been an incredibly productive week.
So that's why you haven't responded to the 5,000 memes and reels I sent you?
That's probably why.
I'm just kidding. But today we have an incredible guest on today. One of my best friends that lives across the country from me, Serena Norris. So she is coming on today as an expert in systems and processes. And mostly we're really going to focus on project management of a rehab. So if you are doing any kind of rehab in a project, whether it's for a BRRRR, you're going to keep it as a rental property, or it's going to be a house flip, or even it's a short-term rental that maybe you want to furnish, we are going to go through systems and processes you should have in place, including the checklist, the templates, and the software.
Yeah, Serena's just a wealth of knowledge, guys. And there's some episodes where she's like, you're going to have to go to and re-listen multiple times just to really soak up all the knowledge. And this is one of those episodes. So like you guys are going to get so much from the next, 45, 50 minutes, however long this conversation is with Serena.
Yes. And get your pen and paper ready because towards the end, she goes through every template you should be creating to run your rehab projects. And I think that is so informational. Every time I talk to her about real estate, I learn something new.
New.
I need to be doing this. So this was a great opportunity for us to get her on. She also works alongside Nate Robbins, who was on episode 326. So they kind of coexist together as making these flips happen that they've been working on. Serena, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about life before real estate.
Oh, life before real estate. So I actually went to college for graphic design, marketing, and branding. And then I did that for a few years in Beverly Hills for a really high-end menswear company on Rodeo Drive. And after a few years there, I was in my early 20s, and I just realized that I wanted to work for myself, but I didn't want to freelance graphic design, and I didn't know yet what I wanted to do. The only thing holding me in LA was I had a country music, classic rock band that I was in, but I decided to move to Hawaii just for like a couple months, and it ended up being like a year and a half. And when I was out there, I had a friend that made me read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and he kind of plugged in my ear about buying a duplex and house hacking, and before house hacking was going to term. And I started really thinking about my childhood and my interest in real estate in general. And that's when I really just started thinking. I was like literally obsessed with anything houses, like any shows, remodel shows, HGTV. And my thinking about it, like it just runs in my family. Like my dad was a general contractor. My stepdad was a general contractor. Obviously my mom had a type. My grandpa was a general contractor. My other grandpa was an architect. And like ever since I was little, I was in and out of remodels like, from the time I could walk, because that's all my dad did. And we'd consult on like floor plans and like even like Sunday mornings, we'd open up the newspaper and there'd be like floor plan of the week, and he'd dissect it for me and tell me like why the bathrooms all have to be on one side of the house and this and whatever. And so I then was like, oh, when I was little, I used to draw floor plans for fun. And I used to ride on my bike all through the neighborhoods. And anytime I saw a house for sale, I'd always pick up all the flyers. Then I'd go home and I'd spread them out. And I'd literally comp them without even comping them and trying to figure out like why one was worth more than the other. And I was like, I lived in like the poor neighborhood behind like a really, really nice neighborhood. Like it was one of the first Street of Dreams. And so all the houses were really awesome, which is probably why I wanted to look at the flyers. But and then like even if there was an open house, like I was like a kid and I'd like put my bike to the side of the road and walk in. They're like, what is this kid doing in here? So I just realized like I had an interest in real estate and that it fit how I wanted to make, I had the opportunity of like making passive income, working for myself, being self-employed. And so I just was like, at this point, I actually don't know anyone else in construction or real estate. My dad had retired and my grandparents had passed. So I just like, okay, I'm going to go online, get my license and move back to Washington where I know people and kind of start from there. And so literally 3 days after I moved back, I was at my cousin's wedding and I met my mentor, Tarl Yarber. Maybe you guys have heard of him. I actually sat across from him at the rehearsal dinner. And so it's kind of like one of those moments where like right time, right place. And he was talking about how he flips houses and I started getting like really excited because I was like, I don't know anyone who flips houses and here's this guy like right in front of me. This is what I want to do. And so I played it cool for a while, like for a couple days, the wedding, his destination wedding. And then right as he was about to leave, I was like, hold on. I was like, can I get your contact info? And he's like, yeah, what's up? And I was like, I'm going to work for you. When can we meet next week? And so we ended up meeting next week at a Starbucks and I was telling him what I want to do. I was like, hey, I'm not working. I'm like, I can do this full time with you, whatever you need. And so I just started assisting him because at that point, he was flipping like 20 to 25 houses at a time, just him. And so that was a lot. He was like, you know what, I actually need some help. And he really did. So I jumped in and just started helping with everything. A lot of it was like choosing the finishes at first because he was really not, design oriented. And then we pretty much like had no systems in place. Like we were writing scope of works on Word documents and really
that's not what you're supposed to be doing.
I mean, like you can, but like not Word doc. Like,
yeah, I know.
Not like pages on Word. Yeah. I'm talking about 1-page Word doc for a whole house remodel. Yeah. And the thing was because at that point in the market, like it wasn't, contractors weren't really busy. And so he would leverage the contractor and the agent that was going to list the house and had them kind of work together. He trusted both of them and that ended up working for him. But as he got busier and with more projects going on and then how contractors were getting more busy as the market was getting, there was more demand for them. Like they weren't going to take the time to go and plan the house. Like you need to tell them.
You gotta do that legwork for them, right?
Yeah.
Serena, I this is so much good information, but I just want to pause for a second because there's so much in this story that we got to circle back to. So I don't know how many times you and I have talked, and I never knew that you were in a country rock band. So that's something we gotta talk about that offline a little bit. But we also interviewed Nate Robbins. I can't remember which episode he was, but if you guys just go back up 326, all right, so you guys go back 4 episodes, you hear Nate's episode, and you Nate and Tarl, this trifecta that kind of manages this massive flipping business and now events and all these other things together. But it all started by these just kind of chance interactions. If you guys go back to Nate's episode, Nate was working in a bank and Taro walked in, and it was through that conversation that kind of led to something. You and Taro sat across from each other at a rehearsal dinner, and the relationship kind of grew from there. The reason I bring that up is because I think for a lot of our rookies that are listening, you might oftentimes, or every once in a while, also find yourself in a position where you might be sitting across from someone that could potentially change your life, but you have to have the courage to take that opportunity when it's presented to you. Like, Serena, you very much could have had that conversation with Taro, let that weekend pass and then never said anything to the guy. But you said right before you walked off, hey, I'm going to work for you. Let's figure this whole thing out. And I think that's the level of courage that it takes. So my point to my rookies, if you're listening, when that opportunity presents itself, you've got to have the courage to take it because it could pass you by.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I also want to note, like, I came from a place of like, I'll just jump in. Like, I don't want to cause any more work for you. Like, what can I do today that will just alleviate any stress for you? Because a lot of times, people would come to us once we were established and was like, hey, like, is there a position for me, or what can I do? And And I was like, if I have to think about this that hard, like, you're actually adding work for me. I'm not ready to hire anyone. And so, it's like when you do find a mentor, and we can touch on this a little bit later, of some advice on getting started, but, let them know that, like, you're here, and really be assertive and going and intuitive, like what they need, and then try to fill that as soon as possible so they can see the value that you're going to give them, so that they want to invest in you.
And what was that for Taro? And how did you figure that out with him? Was it just picking up on things at the conversation at the wedding?
Well, I think it started in our conversations, and then we met at a Starbucks, but then we went and started walking properties, and I figured out right away that he just needed help keeping everything organized in his mind, because he's got so many projects going on. It's like when you're project managing and you don't have systems going up, you're really flying by the seat of your pants. And when you don't have other team members, you tend to keep all of the information in your head and not put it down. Well, now you're adding the second person that needs to have information. And so I just started, like, recording as much as I could in information and started organizing that for him. And he would call me throughout every day and say, all right, run through what I need to do. So I was just like this sounding board where I was like at the computer, doing like some tasks that he needed, right? Like, started analyzing properties. Like, I didn't even have my license. I didn't even have access to MLS. So I'm literally analyzing through the Zillow and whatever the best I can. And at least sending him some sniff tests on deals. But I would be recording like where they're at in the construction process, what they need to do, keep all the tasks organized. So that way he's on the road calling me, hey, run through the priorities right now. So that was in the beginning, like where the value was, and then just continuing to organize from that, so that we could be more effective and efficient.
One thing that makes me think of, Serena, we recently had Mike Michalowicz on the podcast as well. Gosh, guys, I should be better with our episode numbers, but anyway, I'll figure it out. I'll say it. But Mike came on and he talked about his book Clockwork. And, one of my favorite books that I've read in the last couple of years, but it kind of ties into what Serena's talking about right now. She said that Taro was managing, 20 plus flips by himself, which is insane. But when you are by yourself, you don't have to systematize everything because, like you said, it's all in your mind. But the second you want to bring somebody on, now you've got to go through this pain of taking all this tribal knowledge that you have and trying to download it into this new person. So for all of our rookies that are listening, and believe me, I made the same mistake in my business as well. The lesson for all of our rookies that are listening is that even if you just have one property, if your plan is to scale up and to buy more, focus on those systems and processes on day one, because it's so much easier to build out SOPs. It's so much easier to get your processes in place when you have one property than when you have 10 or 20 or 30 or 50.
Absolutely. And when you get to that amount of properties, all of a sudden you're like, I need someone now. And then you have to pause, and then your project's delayed, and then the training process. And so I honestly, like, one of my biggest things that I tell like new investors is just start recording information, and like the whole systems and processes label can sound really scary and it's like super complex, but keep in mind, like the best systems are super simple to use, right? Like one of the first systems that I put in place for Fixated, our company, was somewhere where we could all access the lockbox codes. Like it sounds so simple, but I would show up to a property and then all of a sudden the lockbox code had changed and I'm trying to call Tarl and then he's not answering because he has a meeting and I'm just sitting there for an hour, right? And it's just like such a time waste, or same thing for him. And so I was like, I'm going to find a centralized place online. So Google Sheets, Smart Sheets, whatever it is, where we can put the address, the lockbox codes, the entity names, and who's driving it that week. Like that was one of the first systems we ever made, and it saved everyone so much time. And we just elaborated from there. So I'm really big on centralized information, and start that from day one. I hate doing something twice. And so if you find yourself like keep trying to look up information, it's taking you a long time, then that's your cue that you need to put a system in place.
Or relying on someone else to give you that information. And via text or whatever, text messages go through so fast that something, Tarl told you last week as to what the code box is, having to go through back text messages, scrolling, looking for that piece of information.
Then we added location of lockbox, because that was a thing too. It was like, cool, lockbox 1, 2, 3, 4, but I'm like walking around the whole house and it's like on the neighbor's fence on the right side. I like behind the bush. Yeah, like I said, really simple system. It saves a lot of time and time's money.
So once you started kind of putting this together for Tarl, what was your actual position with him? What did you bring to the team? And what does your role kind of look like now? And how long have you actually been doing this?
Yeah, so I started with Tarl back April 2015. So over 8 years ago. And at that point, it was really like just assisting him in anything he needed for the projects, learning, biting off more and more as I was learning. And then I became an agent. And so then I could help him analyze deals better by using the MLS. And I also split my time at that point, actually becoming an agent full time and then also helping him. Then I would I started putting finished packages together. So with the design and the market increasing in demand and housing prices increasing and doing a little bit more higher end stuff, like we needed to be much better at picking the design and the finishes and the floor plans. And so I took over making the design packages and then also driving the properties once a week and reporting back anything for him, coordinating some of the finished stuff like cabinet people, and that's kind of where it started. And then as it evolved, I started taking on some of the project management, and then over the years, I pretty much ended where I've taken over all of the project management, managing all the contractors, making the scope of work, managing our coordinator, and material orders, and just pretty much getting the property from A to Z. I'd also, I confirm the underwriting, because I'm the part of the team that has to get the property from acquisition to disposition and make the business plan work. And so I'd sign off on the underwriting for that, because I was the one closest to the numbers. Construction costs are constantly changing, and I was the one that knew that most. So Nate would send me over the projects and his underwriting, and I would do the stamp of approval. So then we would go into construction, and then I'd list them on the back end and disposition, and get them sold so we can make some money.
I was just going to say, Serena, so you mentioned you're throwing some phrases around. I just want to break them down for our audience here. Define acquisition and disposition for folks that aren't super familiar with those phrases.
Yeah, acquisition, buying the property, and then disposition, selling the property. So we would do mainly fix and flips. We've done probably a quarter of the deals that we've done together are BRRRRs. So, we'd buy them, we'd rehab them, then we'd rent them out and refinance. So our disposition in quotes would be that we are now renting them out and turning them over to a property manager. But yeah, acquisition would be sourcing the deal, running the numbers, making sure it makes sense, which is underwriting, and then acquiring it and putting it in our name.
So I want to go further more into your project management role, such as, how you're estimating rehabs, how you're hiring contractors, how you're managing the contractors, how you're managing the rehab. So let's just start with the estimation and deciding what materials you're going to use, and kind of walk us through what is the best process that you have put together for this.
If I can jump in before you answer that, Serena, I just want to let all of our rookies know, Ashley, Serena, and I spent a day together. Maybe that was like a little over a year ago. And we got to walk with Serena through a few of her projects. And Serena's like a savant, like a encyclopedia of project management for flipping houses. Like I love James Daynard, and I feel like you and James, like when it comes to like managing a rehab, are like neck and neck with each other. So
except
you guys
Serena's processes.
That is like, wow, that's like the biggest compliment.
If you see like the difference of their like templates and worksheets and actual like computer screens, Serena's is way more detailed than James's is.
Yeah. But I think even for me, Serena, like before we even get into that piece, like I feel like people can sometimes feel overwhelmed, especially if this is your first time doing this. Like, so if we can even just start there first, like I've got this old beat up house, my first time doing this. How do I even take that into like, how do I not get overwhelmed, I guess, by looking at the start of this big project?
Yeah. The way that the first thing that comes to mind with that, putting myself in their shoes is rely on, like, work backwards. Start with the comps. The comps are king. Like, you have an example. So the comparable houses that you need to achieve your after remodel value, that's what you're going to reference in a map of what to do with that property. And so when you are in the planning starts during acquisitions, right? Because you have to think, okay, what's the strategy for this deal? Am I just putting like new carpet in, like, and I can sell it that way, and that's what makes me a good deal? Or are we going all the way down to the studs, putting in all new electrical, plumbing, whatever? It's what value do I need that project or that property to get to in order to make sense for my deal? And so if you're feeling overwhelmed with like the amount of rehab, then maybe that's not the project you start with. But if you're like, okay, I see the finished product of what it needs to be, and now the house is in this state right now, what's the difference in that? Well, that's your scope of work. And then anything that you need to fix to make it sellable. And so, yeah, comps are king. A lot of people will buy houses and they're like, I want to make it so cute. I want to make it like HGTV. I want to, they end up like overdoing it. And it's like, you don't have to. Don't get emotional. Don't get attached. You don't worry. There's going to be houses where you can get super excited about as you grow your business and you're invest more capital and like do higher end deals if that's what you want to do. But today, like, this is still a business. Make sure that you're not investing too much in it. So that's my answer, would be like, just comps are king. Always rely on those for your initial direction.
Now you're using a lot of the same materials for each flip. How are you tracking this? How are you, deciding as to what material, what toilet you're going to use or what paint color you're going to use? So you kind of talked about looking at comps, but once you've decided what your ARV is, your after repair value, what's like the next step for you to actually build that scope of work, to build that budget? Do you have information that you're pulling from? How are you knowing what estimates are going to be? All of that. What's your best advice for a rookie on how to do that?
Yeah. So, I would say, like, so building out a scope of work, really, like, the way that we structure it is, we have everything like exterior, interior, and we just label out a lot of it, like materials and labor for some of the things, but also, honestly, if you're just starting out and you really just don't even know where to start, you're like, that the fascia looks like it's bad, but I don't know. One of
Wait,
the
can you
things that
explain
we
what fascia is for
fascia,
anyone that might not know? I mean, that's like one thing
like,
right there that, it was a long time before I even knew what that was.
that's true. Part of the siding. If you see like part of the siding underneath the roof, side of the house, like it looks like it's rotting a little bit. But you're like, I don't know. Like, is it okay if I just paint it? Like, do I have to replace it? Like, I don't know. Honestly, one of the things that we used to do when we weren't, as knowledgeable about construction we'd hire a home inspector. Yeah, it'll cost us a couple $100. But, we would ask them, hey, I don't need a report. Can you just walk it with me and I'll make all the notes? Just so maybe they'll give you like, a half price or something because they don't have to spend time making a report and go through with them. And then they'll point out like all of the defects of the house. Like this, tell them like your intention with this house. I need to fix it up to be like this. Can you help me identify things that I must fix for this house? And then, that should cover then some of the like more structural items, where then you can look at the comps and then decide for the finish level and the design items, right? If all of your comps have quartz or granite or stone countertops, and that's the level of finish you need to get get the value that you need for the deal, then you're going to put it in. That's what you have to put in. The other thing is walking with a bunch of contractors and having them give you a line item estimate. And that's also going to just give you more and more information. Ask questions. Contractors love to talk about construction. So you're walking and they love to, show you that they know what they're talking about. So if you walk with them and go, and trust me, you don't need to know everything. I didn't know everything, like by no means, like even though my dad was a contractor, like, I didn't know a lot about construction. I didn't know what fascia meant either. Right. But I'd walk with them and a lot of times they're like, well, this needs fixing. And I was like, oh, it does in my head. And I'm like, they're like, what do you want me to do with this? And I go, well, what would you do? And then they'd answer and then they'd give me a few options because they love to talk about what they love to, they love to hear themselves talk. So I'm like, and then I go, okay, what's the most cost effective of those? And they'd be like, this. Is it going to look okay? Yeah, that's what we're going to do then. Right. So like, contractors will be your friend, for sure. And also like hiring the home inspectors, or going to meetups, creating relationships with other investors. Maybe you trade off, hey, I'll go walk your properties once a week, do reports for you, take pictures for you. If maybe you can just walk a couple of projects like for me and help me build a scope of work or something, right? Like our investor community we found in Seattle was so supportive. I know that's not everywhere in the US, but, we know like how Harvard world it is out there, especially to learn and no one got to where they were without the help of someone. And so, there are people out there that are willing to help you, and want to see you succeed. So, so getting that information and like, how do I even build a scope of work? That's going to be your starting point. Going back to like the technical side of it is we started with Excel or I guess Word doc and then Excel. And then we moved up to Smartsheets. And from the first scope of work that you create, have that be your template. Start a template from day one, right? So we're going back to that whole, like, don't have the information in your head and keep it there or repeat the wheel over and over again. If you make a scope of work, use that as the foundation for a template and just continue to build onto that. So that way, when you go to make another scope of work, you're not starting from zero. You're going to save a lot of time. The way that we ended up figuring it out was that we wanted to start with a template scope of work on anything that we've ever done on a project, anything we could ever do with a project, even like removing a car, removing an RV, like, whatever it was. We made a massive list of whatever, and built on it. Don't get me wrong. We didn't start that from day one. We built on it as we were doing more projects. So that way we could just take that list and then delete what we don't need from any new project. so we didn't miss things. And the reason why we started doing that, which was years later, by the way, was because I can't tell you how many times I forgot to have the contractor put in a dryer vent. And like, so a dryer vent is like, where the dryer exhausts to the outside. And we don't really put in a washer and dryer into our flips. Like we have the buyers buy them, but we at least put the hookups, obviously. But a lot of times the dryer vent, like that actually goes in the wall, but you don't think about it until the end of the project, really. And so,
So what do you guys have to do? Like cut the
we'd have to cut
drywall?
in sheetrock. Yeah, we'd have to cut in drywall and put it in. And I can't tell you, like, when three or four times, and it's at the end of the project, and or it came up in inspection. There's no dryer vent. I'm like, oh my God. And then we look like idiots to the buyers, right?
Yeah. But mistakes sometimes are like the best teachers, right? Like we had a similar issue where we rehabbed a home, and our crew didn't put a P trap into like the drain in the shower, and it was causing the smell to come back up out of the sewage. And we were like, what the heck is going on? And we had to send all these plumbers, and one plumber finally found the issue, that it was a P trap. So now we make sure, like, anytime we're doing a flip, did you put the P trap in there?
Yeah.
But it's those kind of experiences that teach you that.
Yeah, 100%. And I bet the plumbers go, well, duh, I put in a P trap. And my answer to that is I never assume. Never assume. Also, the biggest tip here, never assume that something is going to done. Always over communicate. Even if it takes off your contractors, you let them know. I never assume. I just want to communicate with you. But yeah, that's how we started that process. What the scope of work is we just started missing small things. And it's like, I'd rather start with something big and then delete what we don't need. And that would make creating a scope of work so much faster too. For us.
I want to tie that into how you were talking about, getting a friend or another contractor to walk with you and kind of help you out, build that scope of work. And I think one really big thing is don't rely on that person to build the scope of work. Go and do it yourself and have them look at it and see if there was anything you missed as a second set of eyes. Don't ask a friend from a meetup or somebody you met to help you on it and be like, can you build the whole scope of work? I have nothing. Have something prepared for them to present to them to look through. So it doesn't take up a ton of their time. They can just maybe point out something you missed, like a dryer vent. And we had a project where a contractor used the old wax seal on the old toilet, put in a brand new toilet, put in brand new tile floor, but used the old wax seal. And we had the same thing. The smell was coming up, and it was because it's the old wax seal in there.
Yeah. The other thing for scope of work that's really, really important is that we learned the hard way is that be very specific in your scope of work. So what we would do is we'd have one column for like the label, like just drywall, but then we'd have an information like description column next to it to say replace drywall A, B, C areas, or like repair everything to this level of finish. Right? Like be really specific, because if you just put repair drywall legally, like that contractor to be like, I repaired the drywall over here. And they're like, well, what about the drywall over here? Right? Or, well, that didn't look like it needed to be repaired. And so be really specific in your descriptions in your scope of work. So that way, if, you don't want to assume like every contractor is going to be a bad apple, but there are ones that will take advantage of you. And so, you need to make sure that you protect yourself in that verbiage. Yeah.
Let me ask one follow-up question on the scope of work. I want to get into kind of the contract and the payment schedules. I guess this kind of ties into it. But are you having, and Ash, I'm curious for you as well, but are you having your contractors sign the scope of work before the job starts? We've had some issues in the past with some contractors where they, once I asked them to sign a scope of work, they just like ghosted me, which is probably a good sign that we didn't work with them. But I guess like what's your process for like holding like contractually the contract, the scope of work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my process is I create the scope of work off my template that I've already used. I delete what they don't need. I make sure that the descriptions match what's actually needed on the project. And then I export that into an Excel, and I have them bid right off of that Excel.
So they're going and filling in the line items for each amount.
Yep.
Okay.
Filling in the line items. And to be honest, the contractors loved that because it saves their time. They don't have to type up a scope of work on their estimate, because you're like, I want a detailed line item estimate. That creates so much work for them, and it might not be in the verbiage that you want. So we would control the verbiage, and then at that point they'd give us the Excel sheet back with
It's
their
so
numbers
easy to
on it.
compare then too.
Then I could
Yeah.
compare apples to apples, so I'd be able to make decisions quicker, or I'd go back and then we'd talk about it. We'd negotiate. That would also help me, like on that scope of work template sheet, I also had my unit costs, so I could go and plug in quantities to create a detailed budget. I'd obviously delete that before I sent it over to them. But that would also help me understand how to change those numbers if I needed to. Like if costs went up, labor went up or something, then that makes me be able to revise the template. So anyway, so I create the scope of work.
Hold on,
export
Serena.
it to
Before you
Excel.
go on, I want to like really highlight that as to how you are tracking what the going rate is for different labor in your area and in your market. And I actually remember, 6 months ago, a year, whatever, you had told me that you were working on updating everything because everything had changed so much in the market.
Every 3
Contractors,
months,
you're like, I'm spending my today going through and actually updating pricing for, what the painter costs per square foot and all these different things. And I think that is something very simple, that information to just start gathering as you're getting, contractor estimates in for each project, and just slowly, keeping that information together. And it's just going to help you become better and better at building, more accurate estimates.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to note, like some of you might be thinking, oh, how do I budget like a unit cost, right? Because like, carpet has a different unit than, square footage for paint, or however, like they're going to, the contractor is going to bid it out. A great book to read is Estimating Rehab Costs by Jay Scott. He like lines that all out in how contractors do their estimates. And so, yeah, so that would really help, is like I kind of controlled the format of that. So that way I can compare apples to apples and update my templates. So that way when I'm going through and confirming during underwriting, like that before we buy the property, I have the most accurate numbers that I can predict that I'm going to get when I finally get the estimate back from the contractors. So then at that point, contract related, I have the scope of work in the Excel format with their numbers. We've agreed on it, and I'll save it as a PDF, and I'll attach that to a contract that we have that lines out, here's the property, here's the owner, here's the contractor that we're going to use, here's the estimated, or here's the deadline date that they're going to be finished with, here's the deposit amount they're going to get, how they're going to get draws. Draws are partial payments towards the total payment. And what happens if we want to split ways. And then we'll also do a penalty per diem, like $125 a day if they go over their completion date. And so all of that verbiage that we needed, it's just a couple pages long contract. And so I'd attach that PDF to that contract. And then I'd also attach our finished packet that I would create with all of the materials that we're going to use and for them to order. And then also if we have floor plans as built, which is the existing floor plan, and then the proposed floor plan. And I'll attach that all together in the same PDF, and I'll have them sign the contract and initial each page of all of those pages. So that way it's binding. And the best part is that the scope of work is in our verbiage. So we control anything. If there's any dispute on what, there's no miscommunication at that point. And to be honest, like what Tony said is like, he's had contractors that haven't wanted to sign that. Well, that's a red flag, because contractors should want to get into an agreement where both parties are on the same page and they're happy with what they're signing and moving forward in a partnership.
Yeah, Serena, so much gold there. Everyone that's listening, you're probably gonna have to go back and like replay this episode a few times because there's so many nuggets in what Serena's saying here. But yeah, that last point you made about it being a red flag. 100% absolutely true. I guess one last question. So you've got that all laid out, but in terms of actually paying out the contractor, are you walking the property with them to like say, hey, these milestones were met, so I'm going to release this draw, or like how were you actually validating that the work is done before paying them?
Yeah, absolutely. So different contractors require different deposits and payment schedules. So if you're working with a general contractor, we typically wouldn't give them more than 20% deposit. But that's not a hard rule. If they're like have to purchase a lot of materials up front, and you can kind of look at your scope of work to determine that, say maybe they're like redoing all of the siding, that's going to be a heavy upfront cost to them, then we might increase that a bit. But we would do draws on completion. And so our team, like what our process was, is we'd walk the property at least once a week and we'd take full pictures, like at least 100, 150 pictures. And then we'd upload them into Dropbox. You can also do Google Drive. And we'd review those pictures. So whether it was like me walking through and deciding the completion and feeling then comfortable for them to request a draw payment, then I would allow that, or I would do it from all of the pictures, so from afar, and then confirm, okay, this completion seems about right, and we would have them do equal draws for the remaining. And then if we had permits on the property, and so we needed to have final inspections, typically all the construction is going to be done, and then you have final inspections. The inspections might come back with corrections that are needing to be made, even if the scope of work is technically done. We would withhold about 10% until everything was finalized. All the inspections were finalized. And so that way we still had leverage over them, something to use. Because if you pay them too much, too fast, then you have no leverage. They'll just leave, right? The other thing is that anytime that you have a contractor bidding, if you think that it's too low, then really consider that as well. Because we've had contractors that they were good contractors, but they didn't know how to estimate. And so sometimes we'd get things back and be like, this just doesn't seem right. This actually seems too low. And instead of going, woo, like we got a deal, I just want to let you guys know that can cause problems in the long run, because they might run out of money halfway through your project. And if they run out of money, they're going to have to go find other jobs and work on other jobs and then let your job sit. And they may not even be able to ever come back. So just keep that in mind down the road.
So you've mentioned a lot of things that you're doing to track this rehab for each project. Can you kind of go through like, here's the different templates I have, and if you're the different softwares you're using, what are the things that rookies should be creating? Like you mentioned scope of work. What are some other types of templates they should be creating and use to work from for every single rehab from start to finish?
Yeah. So I'll go through our platforms first. So we always use Dropbox for our file storage. So what we would do is, and everything's a template. We'd have the second that we're purchasing a property, we would go into Dropbox, create a folder for that project, and then have these same uniform folders for everything. We'd have our analysis folder, which all of our acquisitions, our P&L sheet, anything having to do with the deal, the comps, right? Comps, P&L, anything that has to do with like the deal. Then we'd have the purchase docs. We'd have our rehab folder. So all of our contracts are going to go in there, our bids that we're going to collect, invoices, whatever. Then we have our rehab picks. And in that folder, we would label each time that we would drive the property and upload pictures. We'd label it the date, who took the pictures, and the status of construction that it was in. So it would be like, April 1st, this date, Serena took the pictures and electrical rough-in completed. And so at that point, we could go back and go, all right, I'm trying to find I need to see in the walls. We're at the end of the project. I need to go find like where an outlet is because it's hidden in the drywall. And so now I know, instead of like sifting through like hundreds of folders of dates and stuff, I know, oh, electrical rough-in right there. And that wasn't perfect from day one. I did that a lot until I realized maybe I should label these folders.
Some
the order of
organization, right? But let me ask, just out of curiosity, is there a reason you went with Dropbox versus Google Drive?
Honestly, Google Drive wasn't a big thing like 8 years ago. So
Yeah,
it was
that's
like,
true.
so it was, so because we started that process way back in the day. So Google Drive works just as well. So we'd have Dropbox. That's where all of our file storage, like anytime I got a bid, whether we used it or not, I put it in the bids folder. Every invoice, we put it in the invoice folder. Then we'd have also our plans. So that's where we'd keep our floor plans, finished packet, our saved scope of work. And so that's one platform that we'd use for our file storage. And all of our team members had access to it. The other one is we use Smartsheets. So Smartsheets can be, a bit pricey, but if you plan on doing multiple projects, it's something to invest in. That's where we would that's where we'd build our scope of work and budget template. So we had that. For those of you that don't know Smartsheets, it's pretty much just like a really high-tech Excel. And then, so we'd have our scope of work and budget template within that. Then we'd also have this sheet called our accounting hard costs. And that was pretty much just an ongoing, any expenses for that one property. The second you purchase something, the second that anything is paid, it just goes in there. And so
was this something that was then sent to a bookkeeper who actually like formally entered it into QuickBooks or something? Okay.
Exactly. So our bookkeeper had access to that sheet, and she would audit the accounts to make sure there wasn't any fraudulent activity and making sure it was all balanced. And then she would then input that into QuickBooks.
Gotcha. So she was using that spreadsheet to reconcile against like the bank statements or whatever to make sure that there weren't any transactions missing or anything like that.
100%. And then at that point, our whole team at any point could be like, hey, was this contractor paid? I don't need to go and call Nate Tarl for that or my assistant for that. I can just look it up and see if it's paid, right? So a lot of these systems that we've created, these centralized information places, that's what I like to call it, limits the amount of time I have to communicate with my team members. Because the more times we have to pick up the phone and call and we're waiting for information,
I never want to talk to Nate and Tarl either. I totally get it.
Honestly, at the end, people are like, do you talk to Tarl like all day, every day? And I'm like, I haven't talked to him in like a week.
Yeah.
Like we just wouldn't talk. And so we have our scope of work and budget sheet. We have the accounting hard cost sheet. And then I also have a finish package template. So the finishes are going to be, the types of doors, the door hardware, the countertop cabinet, tile design, whatever. And the same process as the scope of work. I just started as, I need to make a template. Okay, I'm going to start with this project and I'm going to put, what it is, exterior door, where to get, what the description is, where to get it, and a picture of it. And then I'm just going to, anytime we have a project, I'm just going to add this in to the template. And so eventually I just built this massive template of all of these materials, and I could just go shopping. Like a lot of times we would redo the same finishes on each house. So when I'm in the planning phase, and I've figured out what a scope of work is going to be. I've looked at the comps. I've figured out the level of finish that we need to, what type of materials we have to put into it. I'd pull up that sheet and I would just select what I wanted, kind of, going shopping. And then I would export it into a PDF. And that's something that my team could reference, the contractors can reference, I can reference. And that would be something that we'd also attach to that scope of work within the contract.
Serena, I've heard you talk about this sheet a ton of times. So Daryl and I actually built this out, the materials list. And one thing we did is that we would just link the actual product in there. So we did like flooring. Here's the types of flooring. We'd link it in there. Then we actually hired a virtual assistant to actually take the data from the link and actually fill out, the other 6 columns or how many there were. And that was so much faster.
Look at you. You're better than me. I didn't have that.
At first I was like, I cannot sit here and do this. Like, this is getting so mundane. I'm like, this is awful. Like, my fingers hurt. And so then we just did that. And it was so cost effective, and somebody could do it, way faster than me that has a better attention span, I guess. But you just go to like Upwork and, search, this is what I need done. You show a screenshot of your template and, do a Loom video of exactly how to pull the information, what information you want from each link, and have it all filled out. Yeah.
I also like keeping, now that I'm thinking about it, I actually should have had the link. I'm going to add the links to the product within that PDF, because I used to put the pricing down in for each line item. And then I'd give it to the contractor. But if I didn't have that pricing updated and they estimated right off that, and they were responsible for buying the material, but then they go to Home Depot and now it's gone up $10 per door hardware, they come back to me and they're like, I need more money. And now I'm like, well, shoot, that wasn't what was in the projection. And so I said, I'm going to delete all the pricing, and they're going to have to just be responsible for looking it up. If I put the link in it, they could just click it and do their own like quicker research. But yeah, that was the thing.
One
like,
piece
don't put the price
too, that we struggled with is like, if it changes, goes on sale or whatever, even like it's discontinued, is like having to go. So like maybe that's something, even like hiring a VA like every quarter to go in or whatever. And just like all you have to do is make sure these links are updated.
Yeah, that was one thing we would do periodically, like every couple months, is my assistant go through and make sure like everything was updated on like the scope of work, like prices so I wouldn't put the prices on the finished packet because that's what the contractor is referencing when they're estimating. But at least for if there's a door unit cost on our scope of work budget, and they've gone from 260 to 350, I want to know that. So I'd have her do that.
Serena, one question I want to ask was you've got these systems dialed in to really high level of detail, and I think one belief, maybe a limiting belief, that a lot of people have when it comes to flipping homes is that you got to be there to walk the properties, you got to be there to shake the contractor's hands and make sure that you're checking on their work. Is that true, or is it possible to kind of do this remotely as well?
It's totally possible to do it remotely, as long as you have boots on the ground that are driving the properties at least once a week. So even if nothing changes in the rehab, say it's sitting there, we're waiting for permits to get processed, we will still drive it every week, because you never know if squatters are going to show up. All of a sudden, a pipe's going to burst. It's going to whatever. You want to make sure that you also have pictures if anything happens that you need to go to like court for, not to scare you guys, but like, if someone breaks in and you need to file an insurance claim or something like that, you now have a record trail. And so the blessing, like the biggest blessing for being efficient in our business, was the fact that both Tarl and I lived over an hour away from all of the projects that we did. So there was no way we're going to drive 2, maybe 3 hours in traffic to and from those projects every day or every other day. So we created these systems to be able to manage them afar. We'll go down once a week and we'll take pictures once a week. And then we trained our contractors that if they had a question, they text us a few pictures, they send us a video, or we FaceTime them, and we'll get them the information that they need. And then we also made sure that we had boots on the ground in that area, networking, maybe like newer investors that wanted to learn, where if we really needed something, then they would help us out, because we're also like contributing to and helping them grow their business. The other thing is we'd also have like a handyman on call, where say a basement all of a sudden starts flooding, and our contractor can't get there, that's on the job, or it's not part of his scope. We need it cleaned up, like, something after hours. And they're just going to be too expensive to do it. Like they'll go and put bags and vac it out or something like that. So, in the beginning, when we didn't have systems set up, like I was working 6.5 days a week, like long freaking days. But mainly on the computer. I'd only drive the properties once a week. And as you start setting up these systems, these templates, and getting really good at the planning in the beginning to get the contractors all of the information that they need up front, then you're really just monitoring the construction as it goes along and problem solving little things that come up that were unforeseen in the beginning. And so within the last few years, like I've gone to South Africa for 2 months at a time while I have 7 projects going on, for example, or, I travel a ton, at least once a month. And so
you're not even home right now as you're doing this podcast.
I'm not home right now. Yeah, exactly. And having that freedom, and that's why we got into real estate. Right. And so start today and building those systems, building those templates. And it's, like I said, they're not scary. Just start putting information down on paper and then figuring out how you want to organize that. And if you're not the best at that, then hire a VA that is good at organization, and then eventually lead up to hiring a team member that is. I did realize that we didn't cover like another platform that we use that's really important. Should I touch on that? So we have like Dropbox for our file storage, and we have Smartsheet for all of our like data, like scope of work, costs, finishes, whatever. But then we used a project management tool, like a communication. We use Asana. So you can also use, I know Ashley used Monday.com, right? So very similar platforms. And we would create, again, a template surprise for all of our projects. And so when we acquire a property, even actually there was a template for acquisitions too, making sure like, you need A, B, C, D, like purchase things, just to keep your
like
organized.
You have insurance in place. You got the
need,
electric meter, who the electric company is. Yeah. Account number.
100%.
Like that, yeah.
So we just created a template for project management. So did we transfer the utilities in our name? Have we requested a bid from the general contractor? Have we done the floor plans? Have we done this or whatever? So that way nothing goes missed. And then we'd also use Asana to communicate with each other. So instead of emails, texts, whatever, we would try our best to actually communicate with each other in that task that's related to that item. And that worked really well for us. That's also where we would manage our schedule of construction. And again, like build it to however works for you and your team. And if you kind of the way that we laid it out is in the order of construction, chronological, how things needed. And that's how it stayed organized for us. But I think that's pretty much all of our platforms. I mean, QuickBooks for the accounting.
What about for the rental properties that you guys keep? What software are you using for that?
I'll try to elaborate on that. I honestly don't do any of the property management at all. But I do think,
is it Appfolio?
Appfolio? I'm not sure. Actually for acquisitions, Nate, he would use Podio, as a CRM. But I was never in there. And then, I'm not sure actually what we use for our property management. Cause I don't want anything to do with that. So.
I guess before we wrap up, there's one last question we want to ask you. And that's, if you had to start all over, what would be some of the first things that you would do today, starting completely over?
I know this is a tough one. I think
start a new band.
Yeah. Start a new band. Honestly, I would, if you're out there really deciding like, okay, what asset class should I go into? Like, should I flip houses? Should I do short-term rentals? Should I do, commercial, or what should I do first? Like, at first consider the lifestyle that you eventually want. In the beginning, you're going to work your butt off, like wherever you go. But imagine down the road, the lifestyle that you want. Do you what's the liquidity that you need, right? Do you need cash now consistently? Or are you able to keep your equity in? Like you just want like a longer term hold. I'd get really clear on that, because wherever you go whatever you decide to do, you should put your all into it to become the best at that before you pivot to something else. And then you could also help to become clear of what you need for other people in your community. So really defining, just like you would define a buy box for a project, property that you want to flip, become like branded of like, this is what I'm after. So that way people know how to help you. So that and then also the type of mentor that you're looking for. And like I said, like no one got to where they got in this business without mentor. So, and people do want to help you. It's just that come to them, first go to meetups. And the simplest thing that comes to my mind is if there's like if you want to get into house flipping, but you're like, I just need to see, to learn, and I'll feel more comfortable. Just say, hey, how many properties do you got going? Oh, cool. You've got 8 projects going on. That's amazing. Would it be helpful for you if I drove your properties once a week, took pictures in an organized way? I'll take at least 150 pictures for you every week, upload them in the way that you want to be uploaded. So that way you have them, you can reference them, and I maybe can take like a drive off your plate. And then they're probably like, yeah, why not? Okay. Right. Like, but then would it be okay if you're going to meet a contractor there, can I just come along? I want to, I'll be a fly on the wall. Can I just shadow you? See, what you guys talk about or whatever. And like real estate isn't hard. Like it's not rocket science. The hardest thing is having the courage, the grit, the gumption to do it. Right. And so by learning through familiarity, you're going to feel so much more comfortable in it and realizing like, this isn't actually rocket science. You see that it needs to be fixed. You write down that it needs to be fixed. You have someone give you an estimate of what's going to be fixed, and then you decide yes or no, right? And so that's where I'd start. Also, create systems from day one, so that way when you do end up amping up, you need to add team members, the information's there and it's not all in your head. And then if I would put healthy contingency margins, if you're not really confident on your rehab costs and your analysis, just make sure you put, some contingency in there so you're not eating into your margin. And always follow the comps. Like don't get emotional or attached.
So where can people find a consultant? But really, Serena, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time today to teach us all about this, your process. Like I know I was writing notes. I could see Tony taking down notes too, because anytime we talk to you about this stuff, that I always learn so much information. So I'm sure every single listener has at least 5 takeaways that they can put into action today. So where can everyone reach out to you and find out some more information about you?
Yeah. So on Instagram, my handle is Serena.Claire. So SERENA.CLAIRE. Also, you can email me, scalewithserena@gmail.com. I love helping new flippers and people in real estate find their way. Yeah, that's where you can find me.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ashley at Wealth from Rentals, and he's Tony at Tony J. Robinson on Instagram. And we will be back on Wednesday with another guest. We'll see you guys then.